guys that are actually feeding the data, as well as you can do individual reports. But the biggest problem you have with small companies, Target was hacked the exact same way through a Pennsylvania company, and got into the POS. The largest thing is if I told you I was hacked today, and I'm a cybersecurity company or anyone else who's doing business. So we think that there's probably about 60% of hacks go unnoticed, because as long as I can cover and I pay my liabilities, I don't want to say anything. So if I'm not public like Yahoo, we don't know about most of those.
Even public don't actually share too much information. There is a huge issue with sharing information. I would say that there is hardly no information sharing. On top of my daily job in CEPIO, I'm an ambassador for Global Cyber Alliance. And one of the tasks that we are working, and just recently was yesterday, we had a call to discuss small business solution, to provide a simple to deploy, not so expensive toolkit for small businesses. But when you do something like that, you start by saying, okay, what's their need? And one of the most important things is there's no understanding, but on top of that, even if you pass that, regardless if you push them towards that or you convince them to do that willingly, there's no one to look on that. And without monitoring, without really understanding what's going on, because if I'm a laundry shelf or something like that, and someone squeezed my hand and eventually I installed whatever, endpoint security and firewall, good start. But 3 weeks later, it's useless. No updates, no one looks on that. The logs are not being reviewed. I don't want to be too technical, but the main idea is small businesses need more than just a to-do list. They need service provider that will help them to do that. And one of the things that I'm trying to push towards is to create enough room for many players in the MSSP or the hosted services market that will provide a complete set. And complete set is not just, let's go to online and buy whatever endpoint security, I'm not going to do any commercial, or any firewall or whatever I need. Let's go to someone that will install it, maintain it, monitor it, and let me know on a periodic way what's my cyber health. Because someone calls you if someone opens the door at 2 a.m. If the physical door is open, because you pay to whatever, ADT or someone else. Why don't you get the same without being techie, without understanding, but someone needs to call you and say, hey, you have a problem. Someone is looking inside your network. I blocked it, but be aware of that. Because eventually, as a business owner, you are in a risk. As a business owner that provides a service to someone bigger, you are in a bigger risk. And it goes up to the hill.
Yeah, I have to jump in and say I couldn't agree more, because that's our entire business model. And the reality is that
I know, I'm waiting for the commission later.
Yeah. But the reality is this. The reason we got started in it is we had a client a few years ago call us up and say, oh, the server's not working. And we look at it and we find 2 new user accounts that we didn't add. I opened up the folders to see maybe I could find out what was inside. And it was all written in Chinese. And I can't read Chinese. So I knew something's messed up. Went in, found the problem, closed the holes, and went looking for a solution and realized even today, most solutions, even the companies that we see, and this is why it's hard to find really good solution providers, they want to sell you a product and say, here you go, you're fixed now, go buy.
Yeah, good luck.
No, the reality is that's why you need like a home alarm. You want to make sure, people have home alarms all the time, but they never go home and go down and check it and see if it's working, because it's got to be given, it's got to be provided. And there are companies out there like us, we do it, that it's a service, you don't have to touch anything, it works. If it doesn't work, we replace the parts. But you're absolutely right. I mean, for the small guy, you can't they don't have any technical people in-house. They can't do anything. They have to be handheld. And that's what's going to make a difference in the future, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the real challenge, right, for small businesses, is that everybody's hearing about cyber and cybersecurity, and there's these threats and hacks are happening every day. And what is a small business supposed to do, especially when there are limited resources for that small business? If they don't have the technical expertise, if they don't have the money to implement some of these technical solutions or other solutions, small businesses, I think, often find themselves kind of at a loss. So, but just because you're a small business, as we've already mentioned, doesn't mean you're immune to these attacks. Attackers are still coming after you, and
Or through you.
or through you. And even though you think you might not be valuable to a hacker, you are. They will monetize the attack in some way. And from a legal perspective, you're still going to be liable. There are still laws out there with which you have to comply, or regulations. Or even if you have customers, they might end up suing you if there's a breach. So that's something to be concerned about, obviously. But then, of course, the important question is, what do you do? How do you protect yourself? How can you avoid legal liability? How can you avoid the attack in the first place, if at all? So it's really, that's the real challenge. What is a small business supposed to do when they have limited resources? And I'm hoping that today we can give you some ideas for that. But it's a difficult challenge.
I would-
about it.
What if I'm a small business, I have antivirus software installed? Is that going to cover me?
No, absolutely no. But I would like to add just a bit more, because I think it's an important piece. Small business is not always the laundry or something like that. It's not always the grandmom and grandfather that sits there and have no clue. In some cases, and most cases actually, small businesses are, small law firms, small banks. We have, you mentioned the laundry next to the Marine Corps camp. One of our customers is a bank in Columbia, Maryland, next to an important place, and their customers are the employees of that government agency. Hacking into that bank, and they are smart enough to understand it, and they spend on cybersecurity as part of their revenue more than big banks and it was quite encouraging to see that, but they know better. They know that hacking through them into their really just list of customers was a lot, because I came from the intelligence. In most cases, there is no silver bullet solution for anything. And there is no silver bullet piece of information that gives you the entire knowledge that you want to achieve if you want to attack someone or you want to get some intelligence on the US government. But OPM, and then getting the list of customers from that bank, for example, crossing that list of two lists of data will give unbelievable amount of knowledge to the one that gets these two lists.
And they got it.
Absolutely. And it becomes more and more. I was in mid-90s, was involved in kind of investigation. First time I was involved in investigation, and thanks God, last time I was involved in something like that. You are an Israeli, I don't know how familiar with that case you are, but someone stole the entire Social Security record database in Israel. He did it, by the way, for a different reason. He was not an hacker. He worked for that company that worked on that, and he wanted to sell it to some super orthodox organizations in order for them to get a list of potential donors. But he was not exactly the best, the smartest person in the world. Eventually, he actually put it in Google Drive or something similar to that on that time, and offered to sell it for like $1,000 to anyone that wanted to buy it. The value of that is unbelievable. Eventually, of course, the enemies were able to get that, and that's out forever. It's out forever. There's no way to cure from that. Okay, so everyone has that. And OPM is exactly the same. No one is going to change, forget about the PR, no one is going to change Social Security numbers. No one. They don't do the necessity, they're not going to do that. So eventually our data is up, and crossing data between is amazing. And these small businesses, in some cases, are much more high-tech than the laundry and much more strong in terms of financial strength, in terms of ability to pay for service. What they don't have is the ability to, or the knowledge in order to understand how vulnerable they are. And that's something that I believe we all should take out of that and out of anywhere else we are listening to people. Keep in mind, you are vulnerable, you'll be vulnerable, but you need to do at minimum the baseline and cover your bases in order to avoid liability. And liability, you know, too many lawyers in one room is like liability, but on top of that, and I'm sorry about that, but on top of that, we really need to secure our society. We are losing to criminals, like completely losing to criminals and completely losing to our enemies. And we need to change that. So.
Ken, you want to add something? I don't know, Marcus.
Wow, that was a lot, but I'm in the cybersecurity business, and I'm supposed to probably throw out how dangerous the world is out there, and it really is. It's at another level than people understand. There's active warfare going on, and that's sexy, and that's really cool, and that's what we talk about when we're in our meetings. But as a small business, I mean, I'll tell you the truth, I'm confused about the cybersecurity space, and no one has solved it. All that sexiness covers about less than 5% of the actual problems. 95% of your problems as a small business come from your own habits and internal. So if I was to give one piece of information to everybody, I could do it in one word. It's my favorite word, Dashlane. But LastPass, any of these password managers are good. Number 2, have 2 email addresses, one for yourself and one for your business. And that way when they go through your Facebook and they go these things and they're gathering these data to cross-reference. So I have 3 emails. One's for buying stuff on the web, one's my personal, and one's my business. And then the third one is education. Because the number one hack that I heard out of Texas, because we work with them on the voting strategy, how to secure the voting. The biggest hack that they had, they called the comptroller and said, hey, I had problems submitting a check to you guys. I need your bank account. And she said yes. And then I can send you an email from anybody I want and put a link in there. Maybe you're smart, maybe you're not. So what you do is instead of, I know this person, and I click the link, just type the link in. If it came from Bank of America, you know how to search that out. And you have to tell your employees. And the number one problem we have with subcontractors in this space, good policy solves almost all of this. But somebody who's making minimum wage, who happens to be working for a subcontractor, who happens to be on HVAC, and all the target stuff gets out. How do you get that person to do it? So, but as scary as it is out there, the real scariness is when I fire somebody, what do they do internally? So those are the policies that you need to have in place as a business owner, and that'll cure 90%, 95% of all your hacks, because you gave me the data, whether you know it or not. So, you know, phishing is still number 1. No one's sending that guy in Uganda. By far. No one's sending the guy in Uganda in here, but you still get them every once in a while because it's still working. But the other phishing attacks, you have no clue who's hitting those. And I do, we work in Congress. People are still hitting them because it came from somebody you thought you knew. So, you know, that's really it. It's just good sound policy. Yeah. Dashlane, save your world. 112 passwords, I don't know any of them. I only know one.
I think those are really good points because, you know, it does seem overwhelming when you hear everything that's going on. It seems like there's nothing that can be done. But there are actually some very relatively easy, certainly very cost-effective ways of protecting yourself. And, you know, doing those small steps goes a long, long way towards your cybersecurity.
One of the things I mean, everybody's speaking the truth. I mean, it's absolutely a fact. And I'm glad to hear you get multiple email because every client, every friend of mine, every relative, I tell them, you know, have multiple email. And they, oh, I don't want to have multiple. And I said, aliases. And of course, then their eyes glaze over. But in that brochure, there's actually an instruction in there how, like, Google will allow you to have almost unlimited number. And what we do is we have multiple, I've actually got probably somewhere around 300 or 400 aliases. And I know when I get a email that says, oh, your bank has been accessed and you need to change your password, all I got to do is look at the two, and I can see only my bank has that one email address. I know within 15 seconds of seeing it, opening it, reading it, that it didn't come from my bank. And I've had several instances where I've called vendors up and I say, you've been hacked. And they say, oh no, we haven't been hacked. I said, I got an email that only you have. Oh, well, we did have a problem last week. Okay. But the reality is, you've got to be able to use password managers, multiple email addresses. Because if you have, can you imagine for a minute, if you had one key that opened everything that you've got, all I've got to do is follow you home. You know, and then I can get in your car, your house, and all the rest of that. So it's very, very important to make sure that you follow good practices. And the hard part, as Ken is saying, you've got a contractor who's got, you know, minimum wage employees and all the rest of that, is just what Yossi is talking about, is this is an active thing. You can't just put it in place, tell everybody about it, and leave. It is still, the biggest vector is still a human error of somebody clicking. I mean, and I know I've done it. I went to click on something just as I looked at the email address, and I could hear myself say, no, click. Luckily, the antivirus snagged it. But I was lucky that time.
I'll add one more thing. As scary as it is, and as clueless as you might feel, Yahoo had over 500 million accounts hacked. And then 3 months after they announced that, they decided it was 1 billion. And this is after Verizon's buying them. And it was about 9.5 months later, it was actually all the accounts were hacked. Sony was hacked with the CIA, FBI, and FireEye, one of the best cybersecurity companies that I know of. And they were coming in at 3:30, and everybody was in there for the warfare. They still don't know who did it. So you're not alone. Even the big companies, they don't know what they're talking about. We're just trying our best to shore up every place you can. So your own behavior was the best way to do it.
But again, back to the alarm system example is, if you don't want to be, you know, your house not going to be broke and get in, someone will get into your home, you just need a better alarm system than your neighbor, and they'll pass to your neighbor. It's exactly like in cybersecurity in most cases.
100%.
If you are relatively secured in most cases, actually almost in all cases, unless you are targeted specifically, and then good luck, they will just move to the next victim because it's much easier. And there are enough victims that are not doing even the necessities.
Well said. Well said.
And how are you checking on your supply chain and your subcontractors if you're in that type of situation? You're taking care of your own house, but you're also working with a lot of other people.
Well, from a legal perspective, you're going to want to take a very close look at your contract with your providers, with your vendors, right? You want to know exactly what you're expecting of them in terms of their cybersecurity practices, and then you want to verify that they're actually doing it. So it's very important to take a very close look at the exact language of your contract with your vendors to ensure that they're doing what you want them to do in terms of cybersecurity. So that's one of the first things you'll want to do when you sign that contract with your vendor.
Unfortunately, it's also the last thing that you can do. It's almost impossible. Big, huge enterprises are failing in that. I was attending a panel a couple of years ago, and the guys there was the head of cybersecurity in the NSA and the head of cybersecurity in the US Air Force. And the guy from Air Force, you know, I don't want to put him in a bad light, but he was like, there's no problem. We know exactly what's the source of everything that gets in here. And he did it on a public panel. And I was sitting on the back and listening to that, and I was like, this guy is failing his job without knowing anything, because you never know everything. You may know something. And of course the guy from NSA said, well, You know, if you know everything, I'm out of job. Believe me, you don't know anything. And my job is to make sure that our enemies don't know anything about their supply chains. Now, without being too sarcastic, supply chain is, I think, the biggest problem to anyone. Because whatever you control your own. You never control your outside. And there's no really good solution. There is no really good solution. If you are a small business that are developing software and you are using libraries, third-party libraries, 100% sure I put my name here that 100% sure that one of the libraries at minimum is vulnerable to X number of threats. That's life. And you cannot control that. You are not going to develop all the software by yourself. You'll be out of business. If you are an hardware manufacturer, you buy components. 100% sure that some of these components are open to threats. It's a known fact. But you're not going to manufacture all the components by yourself. Hey, you can't be, no one is doing it, even the big one. And third, which is more than that, eventually you have suppliers for so many things. You have visitors, you have your insider threat, which is another aspect to the same problem. You know, call it supply chain, call it the insider threat in terms of that, it's exactly the same. You don't know what people from outside brings in. You know, we had a joke in the past, you want to control everything, go to old Soviet Union, to Siberia, start your own business. No one gets in, no one gets out, everything is manufactured on site. You'll be out of business within 3 weeks, but there will be no supply chain. There will be no outcome also, but that's something else. You go to modern society, you go to modern economy, supply chain is a huge issue. You need to wish and hope that your partners are doing what you are doing. Because you are part of the chain also. No one is the end user, eventually. No one is the end user. Who's the end user? Is the one that you sell the end product is the end user? In one aspect, yes, but he sells that also as a service to someone else or as a benefit to someone else. It's endless. And everyone is a weak part of that endless chain.
So in that, like with the hardware with Intel, they found out that every Intel chip can be hacked. A lot of things from a technology company and supply chain. But from an insider attack and out externally, the one thing that you can do, that you actually can do if you're not a tech company, if you're not in the space, is purge your logs. So if you're giving somebody access to your network, whether it be your CPA or anyone else, or you hire somebody and give them access to your network, when you fire that person or when you switch contractors, I guarantee you, if you look, about 90% of these inside assets, they don't work there anymore. I can almost guarantee you without equivocation that I still have logins over at Lockheed Martin, and I haven't worked there in 10 years. Only because there were so many departments that I worked for. I was a business development guy in advanced technology. So anyone you've given access to, and I do that internally just because I think it's fun, but I look through our logs and I go, hey, that guy doesn't work with us anymore. That contractor out of North Carolina is not on there, but he still has an account on our server. And so purge this and you'll get back, why would I, who cares? But those are things you can concrete do even if you don't understand hardware, data leaks, RAM leaks, supply chain firmware implementations. You can control who you've given access to, take it away and get it correctly. And the other one is the elevation. A lot of times we always give everybody kind of, you got the master pass. You can go in and do anything you want. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do they need to be administrator? It doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want administrator rights to some of our servers. I shouldn't be in there because I don't know what I'm doing, not because I'm dangerous. So again, give the minimum level so they can't elevate themselves up, and then purge your logs, and you'll take care of a lot of those.
I couldn't agree more. I think the reality ends up being we're still back to the same element that it must have been about 20 years ago. I gave a presentation when the internet was new. I was hired by a company out of Minnesota to do a presentation on the internet and K-12. And the guy said, go ahead and talk about it. everybody that's going to be in the audience are going to be educators. So I got up and started talking about the internet. And I proposed the idea that we have laptops, but back then it was desktops. And I got this woman, teacher, probably been in the business for 300 years. And she started yelling, saying, what am I going to do? They're going to be in there. They're going to be looking at all kinds of stuff, and they're not going to be focused on work. And I explained to them, when I was in first grade, Nadine Harmon sat next to me. She raised her hand and said, Mrs. Cromer, I was looking in the back of the book. I said, it's not a technology issue. This is something that's a process-related issue. It's not the laptop or the desktops. Then you have an education issue if your teachers can't keep your kids focused on the topics that they were. And the same thing years later now in business. We have to be able to be aware of what our employees, even if, kind of like what you were talking about, Ken, about I don't want to have administrative privileges, but I don't know what I'm doing in there. Because the reality is, you give a lot of privileges to people that don't need it, and they go in and inadvertently they click on that phishing, download a RAT, remote access tool, and the next thing you know, the whole network is. So it still boils back down to the human element again. You've got to be able to make sure that you just practice safe cyber and understand that really no one is safe. And if you realize nobody is safe, then you're in good company, and you put your seatbelts on in the car. You make sure you do the right practice when you get in. You do smart things. You don't use the same password for everything you have. Use password managers if you don't want to remember anything. Password managers are fantastic. But, it's just the kind of thing that you have to use. It's just more human aspect rather than technology in a lot of the cases.
And never say it's not going to happen to me.
Right. Oh my God.
It's not if, it's when. I mean, that's
It's not even when anymore. It's like
it's when it's going to happen again.
Right. When's it going to happen again? By the way, it's already happened.
We'd like to hear from you. Does anyone have any questions for the panel?
I mean, this is more of an individual question, but so I was at a hotel recently and I had to book a room. The only thing that worked was their business center, and immediately it came out, they said, this is not secure, but how unsafe was that to having to put all my financial information in there?
very unsafe.
Yeah.
Most probably nothing will happen, statistically, it's not going to be a disaster. But, someone asked me what's the best practices in acting in public places. Well, what's the public place? If you go to Blackett in August in the West Coast and everyone around you are hackers, put that off and throw it somewhere away from you. Never bring your computer, don't shake hands with anyone, and you'll be in a relatively good security. But in an hotel, in most cases, don't use public Wi-Fi in the lobby, or I recommend not to use public Wi-Fi in any place. Don't go to your bank and your most secured account unless you really, really, really need it. And I strongly recommend people to tether through their phone if they need to do something like that. Use your phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. Use a very strong security password or something like that in terms of connecting to that. You will maybe spend some of your package if you have some limitation. Most of us don't have any limitation anymore. But the main idea is public Wi-Fi, especially open Wi-Fi, airports, hotels, coffee stores are the most known to be places for bad actors to grab passwords and things like that. Now, in many cases, people don't realize that we are being as a proxy to a bigger company. It's, friends of mine, what can happen to me? Who cares about me? No one. But you are a good friend of that guy that is important, and it's a good way to get into that guy if I'll send an email on your behalf. So knowing your login into your Office 365 or whatever, worth something. And in many cases, we have a research group that sits in the darknet. we see there is a huge marketplace for these username and passwords, and they just sit there, but eventually someone needs something, he goes there, criminal, he goes there and he buys whatever, he picks pieces of information and building a campaign. So we need to be very, very careful on public spaces. That's my
What about
recommendation.
VPNs?
Well, it's
The
better
question,
than nothing.
let's get answer your question. Where were you at and why were you on the non-secure? Were you at a hotel and you were trying to book another hotel,
Yeah, and I had, there was no Wi-Fi in the room,
right?
and
So
I
you
was
went down to their
also
business center.
told, don't use my cell phone, no matter what, don't use my smartphone, no matter what I do, don't
Okay.
put my.
Well, let me answer directly to your question. If I was in that situation, I would have turned off all my Wi-Fi and just used my cell. And I would have either
On
called.
the cellular network,
On the
not on the
cellular network.
Wi-Fi.
The danger is somebody, a man in the middle. I can turn my Wi-Fi on right here, and I can call it Launch Workplaces 1.2, but it's really my phone. And so they're getting there.
That would be-
But if I turn this off, now you're talking a much more sophisticated attack, and they're not sitting out there with the hummingbird trying to gather the analog signals that are going to the
Hacking
digital.
into cellular network is an issue.
So the Wi-Fi, I can get you to touch me. If you see something without an S, then you should not be using your credit card. So turn off your Wi-Fi, use your cellular network, and just punch in your credit card that way. And you're about as safe as you're going to get.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do in that situation.
The other question I had is whether companies like Target and Home Depot, are they doing enough now? Have they learned?
There's nothing to learn. At the end of the day, Mark Zuckerberg has a pretty good security team. I'm just going to say personal security team. He and his sister are hacked about once a week. Twitter, there's nothing you can do. If you're a target and they want in, they only have to be right one time, and there's thousands of them doing hack fest, right? Anonymous, doing whatever they're doing. You have to be right 100% of the time. Hence, you don't see the S, don't put out your financial. You can only be as safe as you can. There's nothing, if you could solve it, if anyone has a solution to this problem, please come to me, because I know a guy who'll write a blank check, and the blank check's big. So there's nothing that can be really done. No, they're not. That's why you get Bank of America giving you the new card, because the pet store that I go to has been hacked twice this year. So I'm on my third card because I use mine at a secure station.
And are you, and with PIN and chip and all that?
I got PIN, chip, it's got my picture. I didn't even know. They just say, hey, Ken, you got a new card. So, it's a problem. It's not going away. So all you can do is your best. If you had your credit card, the next thing I would have done is monitor your charges. If you have a charge and there was a hack that happened, you do have, I think it's like a week at Bank of America to say that was this and I don't know what happened. And they're very forgiving because there's nothing you can do.
I think sometimes you have greater protection with a credit card as opposed to a debit card.
Right.
Question? Sorry.
Mr. Maybe I'm from the authentication field business, so I must disagree with you and about like only the cashback, for example. Maybe for personal use, I use it as well. But for example, LastPass were hacked and millions of passwords were published only because people had one password. And I really think it's important to say that, like for small, medium business, every business they should move to multi-factor authentication. Because without it, like passwords are very old-fashioned. I see.
You add the multi-factor into the LastPass or the Dashlane.
Yeah, there's a whole solution. So I would agree with you. The point
But
being
still, you
is,
have the password set.
Right.
Password should be eliminated.
Right.
Really, if you
And
have
they
the
will be.
option,
They are.
It should be eliminated.
They are going, but
I prefer to use Google multi-factor, Facebook multi-factor, and everything multi-factor rather than to have my password stored in some.
I would agree with you, but you have some level of education on what you should be doing. And so 90% of people still use this one single password, and it's Kathy is good. Now, I wasn't saying that it was a solution. Now, multi-factor also has its own issues as well. It's not that hard to be the man in the middle. They just came out recently. Any of your text, the SMS multi-factor is actually, it's put. Your Google Authenticator is what we also use. But at the basis, if I'm going to get you to do a Google Authenticator, multi-factor, or any other biometric, you probably already have a password manager as well, or something. So I do agree, it's going away, but it's not. And every one of my employees, generally speaking, and their computer people, use the same passwords. And I guarantee you yours are as well. So if you can get them to change that, but I do agree with your point, but from a small business that doesn't have any technical background, just getting onto a password manager will solve the piece. And yes, I would use VPN. That'll solve all kinds of stuff. And if all my employees know I use VPNs all the time, they're not that, it's a pain in the rear, most of my people won't, so. But I agree, good point.
But still, we are talking about multi-factor authentication and password managers. It's not going to save anything if people will steal, and the numbers are still like unbelievable. Use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or admin as their passwords, and it's unbelievable how many of us are still doing it. And so some are smarter, they're doing it up to 7 and up to 6. I've heard that also. And someone said, well, I do use the same password for all my services, but it's different. And I was, okay, how different it is. So I have ABCD bank for bank, I have ABCD Facebook for Facebook, and I was like, I want to be the hacker that actually ruins your life, just for me. But it's really hard to remember, and it's really easy to use third-party solution to manage that, which is, again, single point of failure in potential, so it's a huge issue also. But more than that is strong password. Yeah, passwords will vanish eventually. It takes more time than needed, way too more time than needed, but eventually it will vanish. But in the next 3 years, we're still using passwords. Please change your passwords and keep changing them. It's really hard to remember. Take a small piece of paper and write them. It's better than keeping your whatever password is forever, because that's not going to be the solution. You asked a question about VPN, and I'm not sure if people were listening to that 2 minutes ago, and that's important. When you get into public places, there are other solutions. Okay, there is virtual private networks, encryption of the line, so you get through some service, third-party service or your own service, and you are in an encrypt mode. Okay, so even if someone listens and captures the data in a public Wi-Fi or whatever, it gets garbage. Is it good enough? Nothing is good enough. 10 times better than running openly in the internet, because eventually, you do want to get to the bank through HTTPS. You do want to go to Facebook through HTTPS, secured X. But eventually, not everyone would pay attention to that. Not everyone are doing that. VPN is relatively easy to deploy, relatively non-expensive solution, and it brings a lot of value. For a bigger enterprise, it's just a matter of time to break that encryption. For a small business, for a private person, more than enough. Way more than enough.
And there's free VPNs as well. But
the biggest problem that I've come across, and I think I've discovered this, everybody here has probably spent a couple of hours in college. They've probably gone through some physics class. And they talk about all the forces of nature, the strong force and the weak force, the gravitational force. But I actually have discovered, through my own personal experience, what the strongest force is.
Force of habit.
Force of habit. The force of habit. Well, I'm not the only one that's discovered. The force of habit. The problem that we have is we look at doing multi-factor authentication and go, I'll do that tomorrow. That's a great idea. I want to do it. I'll do it tomorrow. I got to change my password. You know what? I'm going to use the same one I used last week. I don't have time. I got to pick up the dry cleaner. The force of habit is probably the largest reason why we as humans make mistakes, as we do it over and over again. And most difficulty, the federal government. Does anybody here work with the federal government at all? Familiar with 800-171? Okay, so 800-171, the federal government realized that they were exposed because of their supply chain. So they mandated that last December, every supplier had to meet 800-171 NIST standard. And it was an extensive protocol. And I've got clients that had to go through it. And the biggest problem they had was changing their habits. Changing their habits because it's comfortable. You do it over and over again. But I can guarantee you one thing. If you do not change your habits, you just have to decide how severe you will be compromised. Because today, does anybody know what a credit card sells for in the dark net? Any idea?
With the pin on the back?
Yeah.
About $5.
Okay. You know how much an EPHI, electronic personal health information, one patient record goes for? $200. You want to know why they're hacking into small mom and pop doctors' offices? If they have 500 or 600 patients, why is it worth $200? As was discussed before by these knowledgeable people, you can't change your personality. You can't change your life. On that record, it has your your social security number, your date of birth, everything you need, plus stuff that you can't get anywhere else. It has probably your relative's name, your next of kin. So if you want to create fake identities, you can't do better than that. And if you're lucky enough to be able to find a patient record that they're on a controlled substance like oxycodone or something, you can go ahead and sell that all over the place because people will make fake scripts and go out and pick them up before they're caught. So the reality is, we have to be aware of everything that we're exposed, and we have to change our habits. And habits are a difficult thing to change.
Yeah, another question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what is the average small business willing to pay for some kind of cybersecurity solution? I think the stat is of all the hacks, 65% are small business hacks. I believe it's somewhere around there. So what is the small business willing to pay these days on a monthly basis, annual basis? It doesn't seem like they're paying much of anything at the
Well,
moment, but
I'll jump into it because it's the meat and potatoes for us.
okay.
I've talked to a couple of MSPs who are managed service providers. These are guys that are, a few years ago they used to change your toner. Now all of a sudden they're cyber experts. Okay. Some of them say, I can't charge a customer $5 a month for this service. And others have customers that realize the value of it, and they're willing to pay a little more than that. But it's relatively low, and in general, just to give you a point of reference so that, we want to give you information, not just kind of vaguity, our service costs about as much as a small company's internet bill or their lighting bill. And we can make a few coins at it, and like a Siberia, you got to be able to have customers, so you got to keep the lights on. So we make a little bit, but we feel good in the sense that we're selling a service that's not generally available, and it's not outlandish for the client. Now there's a few we talk to that they say, oh, well, that's a lot for us. So it's their choice. But we know that they're going to be hacked. And the question ends up being, and I'll give you a good example. One of the guys I went to school with was a doctor. And I happened to meet him at a presentation that we were giving at a convention, a medical convention. And I said to him, George, hey, listen, let me show you what we've got. I explained it to him. And he looked at me and he said, and this is how you talk about the force of habit and logic. He said, that sounds like a great idea, but I've got cyber insurance. I don't have to worry about it. I looked at him and I said, George, I got health insurance, but I still get sick. So the logic is...
You won't get a dime for the cyber insurance if you're not doing the necessities. It's good paying, but it's not...
Right, and we had a client, exactly, that, boom, they got hacked. Dave, my partner over there, analyzed it, said this is what it is. They submitted it to their insurance company, and they said, no, it's because it doesn't do... So you can't rely on that. The best you can do is maybe if you're lucky enough, you might get some money back, but you have to protect yourself like your business They said 60-65%. I read an article last year that The Guardian did an analysis in London. They said 75% of small businesses were hacked. And out of that...
But there's another is important, and sorry to interrupt, there is another super important number that people forget about. How many businesses will overcome a cyber attack?
Right, and that's where I was going.
Survive 6 months after the attack. Because if my laundry is being attacked or hacked and I know about that, I'm not going in there anymore. My business, my credit card is there. Why should I deal with that? I'll go to the next door one. They're out of business. If my bank being hacked, and it was, but if I know, it's really hard to know, but they are not doing the necessities, they are not showing at least an effort to become better, there's enough banks.
Yossi is absolutely right. There was, Kaspersky did a report that said that in 6 months, it was like 40% of businesses that were hacked were out of business. Because if you go to a doctor and they say, oh, by the way, I'm going to pay for your what is it, the LifeLock and all the rest of that stuff, you're not going to go, you're going to shy away. And businesses will close because, like you say,
Are being closed, not
right, they are being closed. The businesses will close. I know, I was reading about an investment firm just the other day, an investment firm. They got hacked. It was a relatively small hack. All their clients called them up and said, thank you, I'm closing my accounts. I'm closing my accounts. And that was it. Would you stay with an investment firm that got hacked? No. But of course, you're going to move to the next one and you roll the dice.
Sure. But I'll also add that, don't think that if you spend X amount of dollars, you're going to be cyber secure. It's not like you can say, I'm going to spend, $1,000 or $100,000 and then nothing will happen, then I'll be secure. We saw the biggest companies in the world, they have virtually unlimited resources, they still get hacked. So for a small business, you have to also think about what's cost effective. And people will tell you should do a risk assessment and see what damage could happen if you are a victim of a cyber attack. What could it cost you? And you have to do an accounting of all that and see what amount of money am I willing to invest in my cybersecurity. Because you don't have unlimited resources. You can't spend all the money in the world on it. And even if you do, you might not be cyber secure.
You won't.
Right. So it's a tough balancing act that you have to engage in. And but luckily there are, as we mentioned here, there are many very quote unquote cheap or cost effective solutions that will get you really far. That'll help you a lot. And if you're doing them and the company next to you is not doing them, chances are the hacker will move on to the weaker.
For your small business, the SBA has some great
Right.
stuff. And again, it's getting to the basics. Whether it solves everything, nobody can solve it. But you have to start at the bottom and the basics. And most of those are very inexpensive.
Yeah.
And then you bring in other as necessary.
You'll see, SBA, Small Business Association, and Federal Trade Commission, Department of Homeland Security. Most of the states have free resources available to small businesses that you can go, you can check out, you can download, get checklists or other recommendations on what to do. And then, as you get into it, you'll figure out, well, we need some extra help here or there, and then you can go out and find, a service provider if you need one to handle those issues.
I've got a question. We're supposed to be answering, but I've got a question. Of everybody that's sitting out here, you're sitting here because you're interested in learning something about improving your own cybersecurity. Has anybody here thought about the day after you're hacked, what you're going to do? What's your first step and your second step? Does anybody, raise your hand if somebody says, oh, I've got it. One.
I would take my site down.
But do you have a formal plan? Do you have something? Okay. Good. You're rare.
Super rare.
But the important thing is, I think everybody also, and I know that this is like, oh, that's all I need to do is think about something else. But Marcus's organization can direct you. Any one of us can provide some input but you also have to be able to think about the morning after. What do you do? If you have, for instance, information that is extremely valuable, you know, I usually tell people, make sure it's encrypted on your server. Make sure everything's encrypted so if they do steal it, there's not much, you know, that kind of stuff. But you got to think about how do you recover from it. Remember what happened to MedStar last year? With MedStar. MedStar got hacked. They had the whole hospitals all had to run on paperwork for a month or two because they found out the hackers had gotten in and destroyed the backups. So the reality is it was all ransomware. So we have to think about, can we run the next morning? And what do we need to store and keep? And if it terrifies you, good, because it should.
Another quick question. So what do you think about the security of some of these storage, you know, OneDrive? If I'm storing a lot of files on OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever, how secure are these companies?
I'm not going to answer your question, Kenny.
Okay.
You have a personal interest. Well, you know, it's more secure than putting your data in your thumb drive, okay? I would recommend to do that versus that, but it's not really secure. Again, username and password. So, you know, good guess that the username and password is the one that they are using for Facebook also, and you know, it's a matter of time until they get that. But I believe in, well, data is a huge issue. Data is actually the issue. When you hack into a bank and criminals are getting into the bank, in 99.9% of the cases, they're not into the money. They're not looking for money. They're looking for data. Data is 10 times more valuable than any money that they can steal. And keeping data is a huge issue. Well, I know your company, so it's really easy to answer that. But making the data visible, but without the ability to really take it, making the data scattered between different places, so no one will hold all of his data in one place. Make the life of the criminal, think like a criminal for 2 days, and have a plan and architecture that will save your most of the attacks, save you, and most of the attacks are really easy because eventually I'm getting into a network, I'm walking through the network, and believe me, I did it so many times, walk through the network and see everything. The ability to get into the network and then getting everything is a nightmare. But if you put just the names of the customers in Dropbox, and it's not really the best practice to do that, and the credit cards with reference to that in Google Docs, and in your thumb drive, don't do it in your thumb drive, but in your local storage, you have something else that connects the dots without giving too much information, well, hacking into that is much harder. That's a campaign versus walking the street and just looking around the stores and taking whatever you want. And
to be clear, when they hack in, they're not going through your files. Okay, especially small businesses, they're not looking for a file. They're typically looking for documents sent in, out, and they're grabbing as much stuff and they just pump it out, whether you're a big company or a small company. They'll sort through it later, they'll sell it later in these different manners. So what Yossi was saying is, whatever you do, if you have it in different places, it's really difficult. My name itself does nothing. My name with my email and my name with everything into one file, the Ken Stalder file, that's valuable. So understand that's really, the data is everything. So.
As the cloud, are you going to say anything else about the cloud?
Well,
businesses?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, because of our business, I will say in Verizon was hacked fairly recently, about 3.5 months ago. And it was this wasn't the Yahoo Verizon, this is Verizon. And what happened is they had a subcontractor come in, and this happens for Azure. OneDrive. They're actually stored in a different company, which I'm not going to say who the name is. Microsoft doesn't have their own servers. That's outsourced. And then that outsourced servers, I know who they are, don't even have people to go in there. There's contractors. Verizon, there's a guy who was supposed to be in there, network engineer, and he forgot to hit the box that said make it private. And so these researchers, the smart guys like Yossi who go around and attack things, found virtually every Verizon account, period. So if you have a Verizon cell phone, cable TV, your account was open to the internet with all your financial data. Now, thankfully, the hack didn't happen. It was caught by, I think, Carnegie Mellon. And they went in and they clicked the box and said, hey, that directory is private. And that's the issue with certain large providers. You don't know who's touching your data. You don't know how many, I outsourced to him to do it because I can't do it. So that's the issue with some of the larger offerings out there is you can't control who they do. But I would say OneDrive, Dropbox, Boxy, those storage solutions are better than about 99% of small, medium-sized businesses security.
And how are you finding out about that? Are you reading
I'm in the
a
business.
contract, or are
We're
you
in the business.
just talking to other people and finding out that information?
We're in the data storage business, and we do nation-state level stuff. So we speak with the people who are housing OneDrive, Microsoft's Azure, the #1 digital data centers in the world, about 30% of them. We work with those. So it's fairly well known. The good thing is they're more secure. The bad thing is if it was cracked, hacked, or anything, it's all gone. And that's the hurdle.
So how could a small business find out more about a cloud company before they sign that contract?
Like you said, the passwords are going away. They really are. QR codes are the thing of the past. RFID. I mean, there's a lot of things in the future. I would say the basis of most small, medium-sized businesses that I know, if you get the basics down, you're going to be okay with OneDrive or with Google Docs. They're more secure than what you're probably using. It's just my personal opinion. My professional opinion, we have an expensive option that probably doesn't fit, but I'm happy to talk to the 5-person company as well. You got to get to the basics, which is good password management, good policy, good storage, and then you can move up from there. So compared to half the people where they store their data, I would think they'd be doing well to go to a Google Docs, OneDrive.
Well, finding your data out is almost impossible. As a small business, it's impossible. We have one of the largest banks in the world. They have a team of dozens of people that are actually looking in the darknet and in the deep web and anywhere that they can find data that goes from the bank. They are actually kind of a team that looking for leakages of data, the plumbers, and they keep finding it. They keep finding it on a daily basis. And they spend, by the way, $100 million a year on cybersecurity. This gives a roughly good idea that there's no really hermetic solution. But it's all about making it out and harder. And we need to think the doctor is a good example, because the doctor is not a small laundry store. The doctor is spending tons of money on his equipment, tons of money on his insurance. We know that. He needs to start spending relatively a lot of money in order to secure us. It's not him, it's us. And if he's not doing it, and eventually there will be a requirement, I want to see that you did A, B, C, D if you want me as a patient. Because otherwise you put me in a risk. I don't care about you, I care about myself. And I'm going to a bank, and actually every time I'm opening a bank account, I'm actually going, I'm doing it for my life. So I am going to see what happened with that bank in the last 12 months. And by the way, not being in the news is the worst nightmare, because they are good in hiding it. There's no way they won't be hacked. And we know, you mentioned names, you mentioned enough names so I can say that some of them, as customers, being hacked by insider threat, by suppliers, from outside, and we're working with them on their incidents and providing them solution. It wasn't in the news. Next day plan for them was hiding the story, not solving the issue, or spending more on hiding the story than solving the issue. I don't want to work with them. You know, they are my customer, I'm not going to be their customer. But seriously now, the main thing is, as a society, we need to demand it. As a small business, we need to implement that, and we need to keep remembering it's a lot of money. But what is not a lot of money? You spend so much on your business in other aspects because that's necessity. And we think that cybersecurity is nice to have. It will take you out of business if you're not spending money on that. Take you out of business. That's statistics. It's not me saying. So unless you do it, good luck.
How worried should you be about giving your social security information? I mean, if you require, like if you go to the hospital, I think they always ask you, can you say, I'm not going to give it to you?
You know, surprisingly, you can. I've had it several times where I've said no, and they said okay. But the Social Security is what they often track for your insurance, and insurance and hospitals are mandated by law. They can't turn you away, so they have to treat you. They have to figure out what to do in the background to be able to, you know, recover their expenses. But don't be free with it. You know, I wouldn't, you know, I was once going into the Pentagon many years ago to do a call, and they asked me for my Social Security number, and I said no. And they were furious and shocked that I said no. And I said, you know, I was working on equipment at the time. I said, your equipment's going to stay down. I'm not giving it. I don't have to. It says right on my Social Security card. It's not a point of, you know. So I went to leave, and they got a supervisor to come out and say, forget it. He crossed all the paperwork and let me go in. But Social Security is a very important number, and unless you absolutely have to give it, I would hold off on that as much as possible. I mean, it's just, that's what I do.
Never give a security, any number to someone that calls you.
Right.
You know, you're the bank, you call me, well, let me call you back. You know, how many of you got the IRS call that you own the money? I'm getting it on a daily basis. I don't own them any money. If so, they own me. But try to immigrate after selling companies to the US. It's not easy.
And they don't call.
And they don't. No one calls you. They will send you a very nice email. They'll reach out to you through your lawyer. They're not going, or your accountant. They're not going to call you. The bank is not calling you in 99% of the cases. Okay, thank you, bank. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Be polite and call them back. You'll be surprised it's not them. You know.
They also don't ask for that information over the phone anyway.
But you know,
Pretty much, they'll tell you if you look at the text, you know, we'll never ask for your account number, we're never going to ask for this.
We called you, we know your account number.
I mean, it's, you know.
but here's the interesting thing, and I don't know if you guys have ever tried this. So a call will come in, and I've gotten these, everybody's got it from your bank, and they'll say, oh, I got to give you an update, you know, or you might have called about something, and you're expecting a call, but you want to see how they are. And you ask them this question: how do I know you're the bank? Well, I've called you, and then I said, can you give me any demonstration? You want me to give you information, but you're not willing to give me one bit of information to prove who you are. Well, and listen to them stammer. But the reality is, one of the things we have to do, going exactly what these guys are talking about, we have to change the culture of security. There's got to be dual-factor authentication when someone calls up, even asking a simple question, that we as consumers can ask them a question that they only know. Now, that doesn't guarantee that it works. It doesn't guarantee that they haven't been hacked.
And most cases, the line will be dead within
right,
the next.
which is exactly the experience I've had probably a dozen times. They said, thank you very much, call us when you got clicked.
In most of these questions, it's a personal question, and it's a matter of convenience. One of our scientists still uses a flip phone, won't bring certain things. He's got this laptop. I mean, I'm not doing that. So I like the convenience of giving the social out. It hasn't caused me problems as of yet. But LifeLock, he used to put his social up there. He stopped doing that because they can't protect you. So, you weigh your options. If I didn't see the S, I wouldn't do financials. If I'm in a hospital, I probably would give my social security number. If I'm talking to Disney World, I probably wouldn't. But it's really a personal decision. If you think that your data is anonymous, you know, it gets scary on you, it's not. I can probably get your social security number. I can definitely, if you have a streaming service, tell you where you live, what you watched, just by using tools of Google, not even special tools. But at the same time, so my scientist, he's scared to death to move, lives in the country, no cable TV. I don't want anything coming in. And I have everything, and everybody can find out. You know, I probably tell you half my social because they use it on half my stuff. So, you know, you got to weigh those options. Where you can't weigh them is the security of what Yossi's given me with his company if we have a relationship, and that's where you really have to, you know, the basis of business. I can't make those decisions for Yossi's company. So you, running your own company, needs to set your policy and agree. I agree. Change. I think the viewpoint should change, but you know, with all the fear factor, you also have to live. So.
We have time for one last question. And then
I was going to make a comment. In Europe, every time you check into a hotel, they require a copy of your passport, even though your passport says it's illegal to copy. But most of them requested at the request of the U.S. government. And so there is a huge contradiction there, and I got into a lot of arguments. And it's impossible. So what I do is I have another ID that it's not a real ID, and I give a copy of that. But you know, doctors require you to give them incredible information. And I recently went to a doctor. He asked me to sign a HIPAA agreement. And at the very, you know, through there, inside there was that they could share my stuff for marketing with third parties, and I had to close it all out. And so you have to be extremely careful. My doctor will ask for a copy of my driver's license, and it's illegal. It's illegal to copy any official government document. But they request for you to do it. I'm not, for example, like my doctors know. They're not to put my data in electronic records. And they say, well, what if you get sick and this and what else? And they want, and I say, well, let me deal with it. But don't put my stuff on.
But you know, the hard part with that now is we do a lot with doctors' offices. Even the doctors that don't want to, if they want to get paid by insurance, have to submit. It's almost exclusive now. The last couple of years, they have to actually. You know, so your doctor may not have all of your records. I guarantee you your insurance company has all your records. So
I'm sure. I'm sure a lot of people out there that would have. So let me tell you why I came here. I'm really interested in looking at actually I'm looking for a consultant. But more on the hard issues of making a network super secure. I know conceptually what I can do. I'm a former chief scientist for an FFRDC. You guys know what an FFRDC is. One of the most elite government think tanks. You know, like MITRE, RAND Corporation. But I'm not, you know, I didn't do that. That's not part of my, that was not part of my responsibilities. I know how to hack into somebody by having a technical doing what I tell them what to do, not by me doing it. So that's what I'm looking for. I don't know if any of you guys think that here, because that's my primary reason for coming here. And I wrote a document back in 2003 on the issue of security. And I told him that there were three basic components for security. This is my own words, which is strategy, culture, and practice. And that will give you security posture. Now, each one of those is extremely complex. if you want to drill into the inside of it. So that I don't mind saying it, because doing it is very hard. And doing it right is even much harder. But it's never dealt on that issue. Last year at a conference, I got approached by Meyer, Lincoln Labs, and Fence Analysis. Because they wanted to do something and they wanted to tap my brain. So I told them, you can tap my brain, but I can give you what I just gave you guys. But I tell you how you do that will cost you. But it's an issue, putting everything together is a major issue of security. Security is not technical. Basically, I think that we can solve the technical issues if you know how to do it, and that's what I'm looking for. But the putting everything together is what makes it very difficult. And I think that any particular small company should do a criticality analysis. How valuable is the data? Can they operate without the data? Accessibility of the data, data integrity, and all of those issues should be looked into to determine how much money you want to spend. Because if you sell bubblegum and you don't want a cash basis, then maybe you don't need as much as if you're dealing with bank transactions. But I think, what you said that habit is the strongest word is true, except if you make the payment exception. Everybody has to pay money, right? That's the most prominent American scientist that ever lived. He used to say that the strongest force was spaghetti sauce to a white sugar.
That's good. And on that note, we can head over for some food and drink. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to Brand Marketing and all.
Is anybody on the audience? If not them, anybody on the audience? I'd like to
Yeah, my pleasure.